Also roast suckling lamb, which is on all whole shoulder is for you. Got calves there on the right hand side. But I'm going to pass these three photographs back. They don't all make sense to you at the moment, but first of all, the one I'm so proud of, which I took literally at the end of May of last year in a field on the northern side of Menorca, and I snapped my fingers and the actual cattle looked round to see what all the noise was about. The grass in fact was getting longer and much of the wildflowers were actually hidden, but a photograph which has now been adopted, you'll see it on the Menorcan, to penetrate deep down within the soil. They'll have seeded those grain crops of wheat, barley and corn during the month of September. Also some fields that have reseeded with grass. By the beginning of October, regardless of how much rain they managed to take 4 crops in places. In March they allow the grass to grow into hay. It's when all the wild flowers emerge, and so many wild flowers you can't see the green of the grass in some of the fields, for the red of the poppies, the blue of the cornflowers, the yellow of the marguerites. Huge drifts of wild orchids along the wall sides, and in the roadsides you'll get drifts of the wild gladioli. They're 8 inches high, carmine flowers, and the ones that all the others have been hybridized from in recent years. And dozens of other different types of wildflowers as well. Towards the end of May, usually that grass is getting rather long and obscuring the wildflowers, and by the end of May they've cut their hay. During the first, second weeks of June they've harvested all their grain crops, and then they leave everything to turn yellow and brown. We're so fortunate here on Menorca compared to other places in the Mediterranean, and especially Mallorca, inasmuch as although we've got no rivers or reservoirs, we've got an unlimited supply of beautiful fresh water. We're actually sitting on top of an underground river which comes down from the Alps underneath the Gulf of Leon, and wherever you put down a well here, you'll encounter that water table. Obviously it's not a huge torrent of water just rushing down towards us. It's in fact millions upon millions of fissures in the rocks that the water gradually seeps through. And they say that the water we're using this year is the melt snows from the Alps of almost 100 years ago. It takes that long to arrive. But it's because of that underground water reservoir, if you like, that since their inception, since weed killers and herbicides were first invented, they've never been allowed to be used here commercially. They believed that, and quite rightly, that those poisons would leach down and poison the underground water supply. So here, everything just grows naturally. And I suppose what we call wildflowers on Menorca are what you call weeds back home. The limestone plateau is across to our right. We're now getting into the Tramontana side, which is named after that horrendous Tramontana wind, which whistles down from Siberia across the Alps, the Gulf of Leon, and hits us fair and square on occasions during the winter, with gusts of up to 140 kilometers an hour, a wind chill factor that brings the temperatures down below zero, and on many occasions you wake up and drive along the island. First thing in the morning there's a white hoar frost right across. A time when the local people won't go out of their homes unless they've got urgent work to do. You've got to hang on to the wall sides to stand up, and roof tiles can be whistling round your head. The Tramontana storms that we get during the winter can cut us off from mainland Spain for up to 10 days at a time, with 40-foot waves which come crashing in over the northern side. And those super ferries that link us now with Barcelona and Valencia won't even attempt to come here if there's one of those imminent Tramontana storms. But the landscape on the northern side, the Tramontana side, taking up a third of, and also much larger fields with plenty of beautiful red soil on the top. This little town of Coutadella, nestled under our highest point, where we're having our last stop this afternoon. is it was therefore strategically a very important place. He said there was some 7,000, I'll say that again, 750 miles of bridle paths, not even wide enough for two horses side by side, let alone a horse and cart. And realizing the importance of moving the military machine from one end of the island to the other, and also to get the foodstuffs from the major farms to Mahon especially, they built a barracks here on the right hand side, one of the 8 British built barracks which still exist around the island. Now they do till all their fields that they're going to cultivate for whatever purpose, inasmuch as they can't plough them. The soil is just not deep enough, and anyway there's so much rock that they break their ploughshares, but springtime cultivators are what they use. And there were 3 major powers in the world at that time. There was France, Spain and Great Britain. Great Britain already had a base at Naples in Italy, and the island of Malta. But because of its strategic position right in the centre of the Western Mediterranean, governing all the shipping lanes, with a massive harbour that would not only overwinter the British Mediterranean fleet, but just about every single fleet in the Mediterranean, and protected at its entrance by a small castle, the British coveted Menorca. But they were on friendly terms with the Spanish at that time, didn't want to precipitate a war, so they bided their time. Eventually, at the beginning of the 18th century, however, a civil war broke out in Spain. There was no natural successor to the throne. In fact, it's called the War of Spanish Succession. And France wanted to put Philip V, a French Bourbon king, on the throne of Spain. Well, you can imagine the consternation back in the Houses of Parliament. The government of Lord Newcastle, who was Prime Minister at that time, and also of Queen Anne, who was on the throne. The combined France and Spain against poor little Great Britain would have been totally annihilated. But luckily for the British, some 40% of all Spanish peoples, those 6 noble families of Menorca, and therefore all the Menorquans, because even to this day they basically follow them in everything they say and do, they were in favour of putting the Archduke of Austria, Charles, on the throne. So Britain seized this chance, set sail here, and were welcomed with open arms by the local people. And except for a small skirmish within the confines of St Philip's Castle, took the island without any loss of life. The year was 1708, and so started almost 100 years of British colonisation. In fact, at the Treaty of Utrecht in 1713, Menorca, together with Gibraltar, which had been taken 2 years earlier, they were both ratified as becoming crown colonies of Great Britain for all time. Now in 1708, the population of Menorca had risen to nearly 10,000 people. The British arrived immediately with some 7 and a further 2,500 who were waiting at Barcelona, having fought their way down through the peninsula to be brought across by boat. And within 6 months they were joined by all their families, their wives and their children, all those hangers-on like innkeepers, like blacksmiths and brothel keepers that would follow any army around at that time. It almost tripled the population of Menorca, and this island just couldn't sustain that number of mouths to feed. It was our very first British governor altogether for the first 23 years, who turned the economy of this island on its head and has given so much that the people of Menorca still enjoy to this day. Lieutenant Colonel Richard Kane was born in Carrickfergus in Ireland, Ireland being one country in those times. A man of the landed gentry, he had his own estates there, which in part still exist to this day. In fact, over the years I've had people from Carrickfergus on the coach, not knowing anything about the connection with this island until literally doing an excursion with me. But 1 or 2 of those couples lived in a suburb called Menorca, and another couple lived in a cul-de-sac called Mahon Gardens. And having been in touch with the tourist board and the local authority of Carrickfergus last year, I found out in fact there's a plaque on the wall of the city hall there in honour of a great son of that city, Richard Kane. We've seen Richard Kane's first surveys. These surveys, done in his own handwriting, also letters back to the government of the day and Queen Anne, imploring them to send finance so he could do to the island what he wished. It was 15 years before any money was forthcoming. So therefore he literally had to put his men to work for food, and the first thing he had done was several areas of low-lying land drained to make market gardens, all of which are still in use to this day. He introduced apples, plums, pears and figs to Menorca. And the blackberries you see on all the wall tops, or brambles if you come from more northern parts of England. They must love the climate here because they are on just about every wall top. He introduced a saddleback pig from Sardinia, and a chicken which is still produced in the UK is called the Menorcan breed of chicken. He also introduced a type of clover. It's called end clover here. It's got 4 leaves. It's a 4-leaf clover, grows to 1 metre high and has beautiful red flowers in the summer. He brought that in as fodder from Central America because he also introduced the Frisian cow from the Frisian Islands, had it crossbred with another one much more used to the dry, arid conditions from South America. And so it is that we've got over 40,000 head of Frisian crossbred cows on the island to this day. It was he who started the building of the naval base, of course, down in the harbour Mahon, which is still used by the Spanish Armada to this day, and also as an auxiliary base for NATO. Many, many other things did Richard Kane do during his 23-year governorship, bringing in all the laws and customs of Great Britain at that time, weights and measures. But eventually, at the age of 73, having devoted so much time from the age of 50 to the people of Menorca, he died here still a single man, who was buried under St. Philip's Castle. St. Philip's Castle, during that first period of British occupation, became Britain's largest fortress anywhere in the world at any time. From a tiny little castle built to stop marauding